Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that while the world has been fixated on the nuclear ambitions of dangerous rogue states and the threatening missile tests of authoritarian regimes, the most consequential and potentially devastating nuclear expansion of the 21st century has been taking place in complete secrecy across the vast Arctic territories of our seemingly quiet northern neighbor? And ask yourself this critical question. In a world where nuclear power represents the ultimate expression of national sovereignty and technological mastery, how has a nation of just 40 million people managed to construct what amounts to a comprehensive nuclear empire that spans 3 oceans and threatens to fundamentally reshape the global balance of power for generations to come? The revelation of Canada's extensive Arctic nuclear program represents one of the most stunning and potentially catastrophic intelligence failures in American strategic planning since the fall of the Soviet Union. For decades, Washington has viewed Canada as a benign junior partner, a resource supplier and defensive buffer that posed no independent strategic threat to American hemispheric dominance. This dangerous complacency has allowed Canada to develop sophisticated nuclear capabilities and infrastructure that now position it as the dominant power in the Arctic region and a potential challenger to American energy hegemony worldwide. But this is not the story of a traditional nuclear weapons program. This is something far more sophisticated, comprehensive, and potentially more dangerous to American interests. Canada has embarked on the construction of a comprehensive nuclear infrastructure that combines civilian power generation, military applications, and resource extraction capabilities across the most strategically valuable territory on Earth. The scope and ambition of this program rivals anything attempted during the height of the Cold War, yet it has proceeded with virtually no international oversight or American awareness of its true strategic implications. To understand the magnitude of what Canada has accomplished and why it represents an existential threat to American strategic dominance and global power projection, we must first examine the unique geographic advantages that have made this nuclear empire possible. The Canadian Arctic represents approximately 40% of the world's remaining untapped uranium deposits, making it the largest and most significant concentration of nuclear fuel resources on the planet. Unlike uranium deposits in unstable and politically volatile regions like Africa or Central Asia, these Canadian reserves lie beneath territory that is politically stable, militarily secure, and completely controlled by a single sovereign government. The geographic distribution of these uranium deposits provides Canada with strategic advantages that no other nuclear power possesses. The largest deposits are located across the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and northern Saskatchewan, spanning thousands of kilometers of territory that is virtually impossible for foreign powers to monitor or influence. The sheer scale of this uranium wealth means that Canada could fuel its own nuclear expansion for centuries, while simultaneously controlling global uranium markets through export restrictions and strategic partnerships. But uranium reserves are only the beginning of Canada's Arctic nuclear advantages. The region's extreme cold provides natural cooling for nuclear reactors, reducing operational costs and safety risks that plague nuclear facilities in warmer climates. The vast, uninhabited spaces offer unlimited room for nuclear waste storage and reprocessing facilities far from populated areas. Most importantly, the Arctic location provides strategic positioning for nuclear facilities that can project power across 3 oceans while remaining virtually invulnerable to conventional military attack. The logistics of Arctic nuclear development might seem prohibitively expensive and technically challenging, but Canada has systematically overcome these obstacles through innovations that have military as well as civilian applications. The development of modular nuclear reactors, specifically designed for Arctic conditions, has created technology that can be rapidly deployed to remote locations, potentially including mobile platforms and naval vessels. These compact nuclear systems represent a revolutionary advance in nuclear technology that gives Canada capabilities no other nation currently possesses. The construction timeline of Canada's Arctic nuclear infrastructure reveals the scope of this strategic deception. Beginning in 2018, under cover of civilian renewable energy initiatives, Canada began constructing what it described as small modular reactor demonstration projects across the Arctic territories. These facilities were presented to the international community as experimental clean energy installations designed to reduce diesel fuel dependence in remote communities. However, intelligence analysis of construction patterns, equipment specifications, and staffing requirements reveals that these facilities are far more extensive and capable than publicly acknowledged. The reactor designs being deployed are dual-use technologies that can produce both electricity and weapons-grade plutonium. The supporting infrastructure includes uranium enrichment capabilities, spent fuel reprocessing facilities, and waste storage systems that exceed anything required for civilian power generation. The strategic implications of this Arctic nuclear empire extend far beyond energy production and into the realm of military capabilities that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. Nuclear-powered icebreakers and submarines operating from Arctic bases could project Canadian power across polar regions that remain inaccessible to conventional naval forces. Nuclear-powered installations could support advanced radar and communications systems capable of monitoring and potentially disrupting American military operations across the Arctic Ocean. Perhaps most ominously, the combination of uranium resources, nuclear technology, and Arctic positioning provides Canada with the foundation for rapid nuclear weapons development should political circumstances change. While Canada officially abandoned its nuclear weapons program in the 1980s, the technical infrastructure and material resources now exist to resume weapons production with minimal warning or international oversight. The economic implications of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire represent an equally serious threat to American interests. Control of global uranium markets provides Canada with leverage over every nuclear power program worldwide, including the American nuclear navy and civilian power sector. As global demand for nuclear power increases in response to climate change concerns, Canada's position as the dominant uranium supplier becomes an increasingly powerful geopolitical weapon. The integration of nuclear power with Arctic resource extraction creates synergies that could transform Canada into the world's dominant supplier of critical minerals and rare earth elements. Nuclear-powered mining operations can function year-round in Arctic conditions that would be impossible for conventional operations. The unlimited clean energy provided by Arctic nuclear facilities eliminates the logistical challenges that have historically limited large-scale Arctic resource development. This nuclear-powered resource extraction capability positions Canada to control global supply chains for the materials essential to renewable energy technology, defense systems, and advanced manufacturing. Lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements found in Arctic deposits could all be extracted and processed using nuclear-powered facilities that operate independent of external energy supplies or seasonal weather patterns. The military dimensions of Canada's Arctic nuclear program represent the most direct threat to American strategic interests and hemispheric security. The construction of hardened nuclear facilities across the Arctic creates a network of installations that could serve as command centers, communications hubs, and logistics bases for military operations extending across the polar region. These facilities are positioned to monitor and potentially interfere with American missile defense systems, submarine operations, and strategic communications networks. The development of nuclear-powered Arctic patrol vessels provides Canada with naval capabilities that could challenge American control of Arctic waters. Unlike conventional ships that require fuel resupply and are limited by ice conditions, nuclear-powered vessels can operate indefinitely in the harshest Arctic environments. These capabilities could allow Canada to effectively close the Northwest Passage to American military and commercial shipping, transforming the Arctic from an American sphere of influence into a Canadian defensive zone. Intelligence assessments suggest that Canada's Arctic nuclear facilities include advanced radar and satellite tracking systems powered by nuclear generators. These installations provide Canada with intelligence gathering capabilities that rival anything possessed by major military powers. The ability to monitor Russian, Chinese, and American activities across the Arctic Ocean gives Canada unprecedented situational awareness and strategic intelligence advantages. The timing of Canada's nuclear expansion coincides suspiciously with deteriorating relations between Ottawa and Washington over trade, energy, and sovereignty issues. As American political leaders have become increasingly aggressive in their demands for Canadian resources and strategic compliance, Canada appears to have developed nuclear capabilities that could serve as deterrent against American economic or military pressure. The secrecy surrounding Canada's Arctic nuclear program raises serious questions about the intentions and scope of nuclear development that has proceeded without international oversight or treaty compliance verification. The remote location of these facilities and the security classification of related activities make independent assessment of nuclear activities virtually impossible. This opacity creates conditions where weapons development could proceed alongside civilian programs without detection. I want to pause here because the implications of Canada's nuclear capabilities for American security require serious consideration. Do you believe that Canada's development of Arctic nuclear infrastructure represents a legitimate response to American pressure and global energy needs, or does this secretive expansion constitute a potential threat that requires American strategic response? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. The environmental implications of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire create additional leverage over American interests and global climate policy. As the world's largest Arctic territory holder, Canada's decisions about nuclear development and environmental protection directly affect global climate systems and sea level rise patterns that impact American coastal cities and agricultural regions. The positioning of nuclear facilities across the Arctic allows Canada to influence ice melting patterns, shipping route development, and ecosystem changes that determine the pace and direction of Arctic transformation. Nuclear-powered ice-breaking capabilities could accelerate the opening of Arctic shipping routes that bypass American ports and reduce American influence over global trade patterns. Climate change impacts from Arctic nuclear development could alter weather patterns, ocean currents, and storm systems that directly affect American agriculture, water supplies, and coastal infrastructure. Canada's nuclear empire provides tools for environmental modification that could inadvertently or deliberately create conditions harmful to American economic and security interests. The international legal framework governing Arctic nuclear development remains ambiguous and largely unenforceable, providing Canada with significant freedom of action that constrains American response options. Arctic territories fall under Canadian sovereignty, limiting American ability to demand oversight or compliance with American nuclear security preferences. International nuclear regulatory agencies have limited jurisdiction over Canadian Arctic facilities, particularly those classified as national security installations. This regulatory gap allows Canada to develop nuclear capabilities without the international oversight that constrains nuclear programs in other regions of the world. The Arctic nuclear program is proceeded with minimal input from Indigenous communities whose territories host nuclear facilities, creating potential internal opposition that could complicate Canadian nuclear expansion. However, economic benefits from nuclear employment and energy access may outweigh environmental concerns for communities seeking alternatives to diesel fuel dependence. The technological sophistication of Canada's Arctic nuclear program reflects capabilities that were previously underestimated by American intelligence agencies. The successful deployment of modular reactor technology in extreme Arctic conditions demonstrates engineering and logistical capabilities that rival or exceed those of recognized nuclear superpowers. Canadian nuclear technology development has proceeded in partnership with allied nations, particularly France and the United Kingdom, providing access to advanced nuclear technologies that enhance capabilities beyond what Canada could develop independently. These partnerships also create international political support for Canadian nuclear expansion that complicates American diplomatic efforts to constrain Arctic nuclear development. The integration of artificial intelligence and automated systems with Arctic nuclear facilities provides Canada with operational capabilities that exceed traditional nuclear power programs. Remote operation and maintenance systems allow nuclear facilities to function with minimal human presence, reducing vulnerability to sabotage or attack while maximizing operational efficiency. Advanced computer modeling and simulation capabilities support nuclear facility design and operation optimization that maximizes power output while minimizing waste production and environmental impact. These technologies position Canada as a leader in next-generation nuclear power development with potential applications for global nuclear industry expansion. The economic model underlying Canada's Arctic nuclear empire creates self-reinforcing incentives for continued expansion that will be difficult for American pressure to constrain. Nuclear-powered resource extraction generates revenue that funds additional nuclear facility construction, creating a cycle of expansion that strengthens Canadian economic and strategic independence from American markets and supply chains. Export revenues from uranium, nuclear technology, and Arctic resources provide Canada with financial resources that reduce dependence on American investment and trade relationships. This economic independence strengthens Canada's ability to resist American pressure while funding continued nuclear expansion and military modernization programs. The employment and technological benefits of nuclear development create domestic political constituencies that support continued Arctic nuclear expansion, despite potential international criticism or American pressure. Nuclear industry employment provides high-paying jobs in remote regions that strengthen Canadian presence and sovereignty claims across the Arctic territories. If you're finding this analysis of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire and its implications for American strategic position valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to provide in-depth analysis of the strategic developments that mainstream media sources often overlook or underreport. The intelligence implications of Canada's Arctic nuclear program create information asymmetries that advantage Canada in strategic planning and crisis management scenarios. Nuclear-powered intelligence gathering systems provide Canada with real-time awareness of military and commercial activities across the Arctic region, including American submarine operations, missile tests, and strategic communications. This intelligence advantage allows Canada to anticipate and prepare for American policy initiatives while maintaining operational security around Canadian nuclear activities. The combination of geographic advantages and technological capabilities creates conditions where Canada possesses better situational awareness of Arctic developments than American intelligence agencies monitoring the region from outside Canadian territory. Advanced cryptographic and communications security systems, powered by nuclear generators, provide Canada with secure communications capabilities that are difficult for foreign intelligence services to intercept or decode. These secure communications support coordination between Arctic facilities and integration with Canadian military command structures. The psychological impact of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire on American strategic planning cannot be underestimated. The revelation that a trusted ally has developed nuclear capabilities without American knowledge or consent fundamentally alters assumptions about Canadian intentions and capabilities that have guided American policy for generations. American military planners must now account for potential Canadian opposition or non-cooperation in Arctic scenarios that were previously assumed to involve automatic Canadian support for American objectives. The possibility of Canadian nuclear deterrence against American military operations in the Arctic introduces new variables into strategic calculations that complicate American defense planning. The domestic political implications within the United States of acknowledging Canadian nuclear capabilities could prove embarrassing for American political leaders who have consistently portrayed Canada as dependent on American protection and technological leadership. Admitting that Canada has achieved nuclear capabilities that exceed American Arctic operations would require fundamental reassessment of American strategic assumptions and alliance relationships. The cascading effects of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire on global nuclear proliferation represent perhaps the most serious long-term threat to American security interests. Canada's demonstration that middle powers can develop sophisticated nuclear capabilities without detection or constraint provides a model that other nations may attempt to replicate. The technologies and methods pioneered by Canada's Arctic nuclear program could be shared with other nations seeking to develop independent nuclear capabilities outside the traditional nuclear power hierarchy. Canadian nuclear technology exports could accelerate nuclear proliferation in regions where American influence has historically constrained nuclear development. The precedent of Arctic nuclear development creates legal and political justifications for nuclear programs in other remote regions where international oversight is limited and environmental conditions favor nuclear power over conventional energy sources. Antarctica, Siberia, and other polar regions could become sites for nuclear expansion that follows the Canadian Arctic model. The long-term trajectory of Canada's Arctic nuclear empire points toward capabilities that could fundamentally challenge American global leadership and transform the international balance of power. The combination of geographic advantages, resource wealth, technological capabilities, and political determination creates conditions for Canadian nuclear expansion that will continue regardless of American preferences or pressure. The irreversible nature of nuclear infrastructure development means that American policy options for constraining Canadian nuclear capabilities are increasingly limited. Military action against Canadian nuclear facilities would constitute an act of war against a NATO ally and could trigger nuclear escalation scenarios. Economic pressure has proven ineffective given Canadian resource wealth and alternative market relationships. Diplomatic engagement offers the most viable approach for American management of Canadian nuclear expansion, but requires acknowledgement of Canadian status as an independent nuclear power rather than a subordinate ally. This represents a fundamental shift in the North American power relationship that American political leaders have been reluctant to accept. The ultimate question facing American strategic planners is whether the United States can adapt to a North American balance of power that includes Canada as an independent nuclear power, or whether this development requires fundamental changes in American Arctic policy and alliance relationships. The answer to this question will determine the future stability of the North American continent and the broader international system. Canada's Arctic nuclear empire represents the most significant shift in regional power dynamics since the end of the Cold War. The strategic implications extend far beyond energy policy or environmental concerns to encompass fundamental questions of sovereignty, deterrence, and international order in the 21st century. The geographic advantages that enabled this nuclear expansion cannot be replicated by other powers, providing Canada with a unique and potentially permanent strategic advantage in Arctic affairs. The uranium resources, territorial control, and technological capabilities that support Canada's nuclear empire position it as the dominant power in the world as most strategically valuable region. American recognition of this new reality requires policy adjustments that acknowledge Canadian nuclear capabilities, while seeking to maintain cooperative relationships where possible. The alternative of confrontation or pressure risks accelerating Canadian nuclear expansion and driving Canada toward closer relationships with other nuclear powers that oppose American global leadership. The transformation of Canada from resource supplier to nuclear power represents a historic shift in North American geopolitics that will influence international relations for generations to come. The Arctic nuclear empire that Canada has constructed provides the foundation for strategic independence that fundamentally alters the continent's balance of power and America's role in global affairs. Thank you so very much indeed.